First comes love, then comes moving in together. Once unheard of for young couples, cohabitation has become commonplace, especially as housing costs skyrocket. But where there's money, there are complications. Joining us now to flag some of the issues of living in common law, we welcome Judith Huddart. She is a family lawyer with Dranoff and Huddart, and Shannon Lee Simmons is back. She's a financial planner and founder of the New School of Finance, and it's good to have you back here again, and you for the first time, I think. Let's just, Sheldon, if you would, put these numbers up here so we can give people a sense of what we're talking about tonight. The number of common law couples rose 13.9% from the year 2006 to 2011, the last year for which figures are available. The number of common law couple families surpassed the number of lone parent families for the first time now, and on average, they're less stable, however. Of the people who broke up between 2001 and 06, common law partners on average lived together 4.3 years. Married couples, on average, together 14.3 years. Let's get into some of the theories here. Shannon, to you first. Shannon or Shannon Lee? I always forget. What do you prefer?
Either or.
Either or,
Yeah.
Okay. A lot of theories why people move in together. Fire away.
From my experience with the clients that I see often, yes, they're in love and it's great, but also there's a lot of financial benefit to moving in together, especially in urban centers. It's a lot cheaper when you are splitting rent, but it still feels like your own place, right? So yes, you have a roommate, but it's somebody that you get to decorate yourself and that kind of thing. So in my experience, people are cohabitating a lot. Like, weddings are expensive. So they're testing it out first before they invest all of that money in the big day. And also, it's a really fast way to split your expenses. And so there's a lot of impetus for people to move in, potentially even too soon.
Let me pick up on that. Judith,
Yeah.
I mean, in your experience, is this more of a financial transaction as opposed to deep love?
It's hard to know. I mean, the problem I have is that most people talk to me about this when it doesn't work out, right? So they don't come to me, which they should, at the beginning and ask about, well, what are the implications of moving in together? You know, what are there legal things, or am I making assumptions that I shouldn't be making? So, you know, really, I'm getting them at the wrong end. They should be coming and talking to me sooner.
If they did come in beforehand to ask for your advice, what would you tell them?
Well, I think for sure I would want to check in on assumptions, because a lot of people think, and it's great if you live together and you're saving, but you know, sometimes these relationships do go longer than the 4 point whatever years, and people have kids, and all of a sudden the relationship isn't working out, and they've been together 6, 7, 8 years, and they have made assumptions about what they get to share afterwards. They think, oh, after 3 years, I get all the same benefits I get if I were married.
Is that not the case?
No, it is not the case. Okay. No. So they're a big sticker shock for these people when they come in.
Okay, Shannon Lee, if people were coming into you for advice before shacking up, what would you tell them?
Well, I don't do the legal stuff, but what's interesting is that I always say, hey, you should sit down with a family lawyer and get a cohabitation agreement. It's one of the first things that I'll tell anyone to avoid potential conflicts down the road, which I've seen. From a financial perspective, I think both people need to out themselves completely with what's going on their finances. So, you know, get financially naked with each other, so to speak, and just how much do you make? What's the debt? Where are we coming from? And that's when you can really start building a plan together from the financial point of view anyways, and you actually know who you're moving in with at that point, so that there's no surprises down the road. And then when you're starting to make a budget with all of this new savings, you can do equitable sharing instead of equal. That's one of the big things with moving in together that I see as an issue from the financial point of view.
Judith, obviously if you're getting married, you call it a prenup. So a cohabitation agreement, is that basically the same thing if you're going to live together?
It is, it is. And unfortunately, though, as Shannon's saying, it's all very well to sit down and talk together. But when you start talking about a cohab agreement, then it's, oh, well, I have to go to this lawyer, you have to go to that lawyer. And all of a sudden, people are not too interested. They feel like they're already starting off on the wrong foot. Kind of the same as with marriage contracts. Although there's no reason, and actually some of my collaborative colleagues and I do see couples together when they're thinking about separation, just to give them information. And there's no reason we couldn't do that, in fact, with people that are thinking of living together, right? I mean, because there's a lot more to the relationship than sharing rent, really.
Totally.
Yeah.
And if you, again, we have two sort of concepts here that we have to presumably follow as you do this. One is to make the agreement equitable, and one is to make it equal. What's the difference?
Well, from my point of view, it's the equitable part comes in when we're actually dealing with like the bills and how we're splitting it. But there are ramifications of that on the other end, especially if there's assets involved. Like one of the big conundrums, which I flag for people and often say, like, this could be something that you want to flush out with a lawyer, is when one person owns a home and then people move in together, but they aren't married, but they're contributing to the household the same. I would say that's when you want to flesh that out, because I mean, rent is one thing, but if there's assets involved upon breakup, there are huge ramifications to that.
So if you're going to do a cohab agreement, are we talking about stuff as simple as, you know, who's going to be mostly responsible for the hydro bill, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, it could be, but it also might mean, you know, are you going to contribute to that home if you're not entitled to it? Because when you break, if you break up, oh dear.
As opposed to when.
Yes, exactly. Then, you know, you may have no share in that house, or you may have a legal battle to get a share because the legislation doesn't automatically give you the share that you would have gotten if you're married. So, and support is another issue, right? I mean, because you know, if they're sharing, but one of them is paying more than the other, so is kind of supporting the other one, then that could trigger obligations. So while they may not share property at the end of the day, they may be building on support obligations. So that's another huge issue that, you know, could come back to haunt someone.
What's a time period that you have to be living together before all of the legal implications of what you've talked about kick in?
Well, there is no time for property because you basically don't get to share it unless you want to sue somebody in court under trust stuff. But for support, it's 3 years if you've been living together and been supported during that period, or 1 year if you have a child together. So it really telescopes the time down, which is, you know, not unusual if you have a child together that someone may not be working or may be on mat leave. And if things break down at that point, there'll be a support, not only child support, but possibly spousal.
So once those time periods have been checked off, so to speak, cohabitating, married, same thing essentially, legally?
Well, for the support issue
In
it
terms
is,
of
but
support.
not on the property. That is the big message I think that I'd like to leave people with today, that do not assume that you get all the benefits of marriage when you come to property sharing, because
Gotcha.
you do not, no.
How common is it, Shannon, for non-married couples to buy a house or a condo together?
I'm seeing it often, especially because in a market like Toronto or even outside where it's more affordable, again, when you combine finances, you have that much more purchasing power. Maybe you have two people coming to the table with money for a down payment. So what I'm anecdotally seeing with my clients is get together, rent, buy a house, then plan the wedding. Like it seems to be going like the down payment and the house pieces first. So I'd say it's very common, especially within the millennial group, because people want to get in and get the market. And if they feel like this is the person that they're going to be with forever, the wedding can wait, because now there's not the same stigma about moving in together. So let's take care of business first, and then we'll get married because we'll have the party later. And so when we think about marriage like a party, then we don't do it first because we want to take care of what's important, which might be buying a house. So I'm seeing a lot of that.
Given the price of houses, particularly in the capital city here, which is just, I mean, it's $1.4 million, right? The average cost of a house. Do you see couples coming to you for advice who are not really couples? There's no romantic involvement, but they are friends and they want to go in on a piece of real estate together?
Yeah, I've seen that a few times. It's mostly two couples that I've seen. So they want to buy a place and then fix it into a duplex almost, so that there's one family that's living upstairs and one downstairs. I haven't seen two individuals coming together, but with four people, that's a lot of purchasing power under your belt. And then at that point, it's like each couple's really buying a $500,000 place, and then it's much more affordable. So I do see that.
Of course, you have to live with the other couple then.
Yeah, you just take the broom. Shut up there.
Well, exactly. And then you want to get out, because I get them at the other end,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And then they realize, oh my God, it's not working out. And how do you get out of that arrangement? Because hopefully all four are on title and not just two. And you know, people want to stay, the others don't want to stay, and it's.
How do you get it? That seems incredibly complicated. How do you sort of resolve that to everybody's satisfaction?
You can ask to have a property partitioned and sold. You can do that, but again, it's a legal proceeding, and that is expensive. So, I would say plan ahead. Just like if you're going to go into business with someone, you're going to have a partnership agreement. Have an agreement as to what's going to happen if that's the case. Because it could just everything could explode if they can't agree.
You know where I found with the few couples that have done that I've seen, because because I red flagged all of the legal, get help, is within the repair and maintenance actually. So everyone's good, but then one couple's like, we need to fix the eavesdrops, and the other one's like, they're fine. And then how do you resolve that, right?
Exactly.
It's an issue.
What's the answer? How do you resolve that?
It should be in an agreement that you talked about before, and
Okay.
if they haven't had that step, then that's when it can get resentful, and that's when it starts to fall apart emotionally.
Gotcha.
And it's hard. Yeah.
How does having kids change all of what we've been talking about so far?
Well, I think it's certainly can change the dynamics of the financial situation, because can you both continue to work? You might have been contributing fairly equally, but then when you've got a child, well, responsibilities change. You may still have a partnership in the sense that, one person is doing more of the work on the home front and the other person is out earning. But, if that relationship breaks down, you do not have the same fallback position that you would have if you were married, because if all the property and the assets are in the spouse's name who's out there working, you're going to have an uphill battle to put yourself in a position where you can both live in separate accommodation and support your child, and then the whole question of whether there be spousal. So you really need to think ahead on that, but people don't, unfortunately, right? But I mean, that to me is often the most telling. And often a child can throw the relationship off balance too. So it isn't surprising, I've seen, where relationships are tested and stressed when a child comes in. So really add to the possibility that relationship will break down.
Let me give you a different kind of a for instance. Young couple decides to get together because they are two incomes, they can afford to buy a property. Doesn't go well, relationship breaks up. But they know that if they do break up, as single earners, they're not going to be able to get back into the housing market.
No.
Do you actually run into people who won't break up because they can't afford to buy a new piece of property?
No, I've actually, whether it's renting or owning, I've come into the, especially in the last 2 or 3 years, I think since the rental market in the city has gone sky high as well, I do see couples who I've had a client come in and say, I want to leave my partner. They were cohabitating, they're not married, and they're under the 3 years, but I can't afford, I don't even have first and last month's rent. And so there was like a plan in order to save up so that she could leave. And it wasn't a dark situation. It was just like, I'm over it and I want to leave, but I can't.
Can't afford to.
So I always urge people, your own financial independence is so important. And you have to make decisions for yourself because you never know how things are going to work out. And the importance of having an emergency fund that is not necessarily connected to the household finances, so that if something happens, you're able to make decisions that you don't have to wait around and wait and say, hey, I can't afford first and last month's rent, or I'm never going to be able to get back into the housing market again. So I wouldn't be surprised if there are couples out there who maybe say, hey, as long as we're amicable, why don't you live downstairs and I'll live upstairs and we'll just hang on to this property because it's appreciating. And I would say that that's clever. if they can make it work from an amicable
and
place.
that's happening in marriages too when they break down, right? Because people are, you can't, buy the same thing that you had as two people when you're separate and you're looking for accommodation. It's a big problem.
Yeah.
Just in our last minute here then, Judith, what kind of legal obligations are there for common law couples in Ontario if you do break up?
Well, the main obligation is, as I said earlier, the support obligation. So if you have been supporting your partner or you have a child, you have to support that child.
Never mind the child. If you're in a common law relationship, let's say for 4 years, and you've been supporting your partner, whichever way it goes, all the way along.
Then there's an obligation. Now again,
how long into the future?
Well, that would depend on, if it's only 4 years, probably not a long-term support obligation, but certainly maybe a year, maybe 2 years to get them back on their feet, depending on what their circumstances are. And you know what? Sometimes people move, so they may not even be in a place where they can get work. So there are all kinds of facts that drive support issues. So it is a problem, yeah.
This is the reality of young love in Ontario today, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Oh my goodness. But I mean, again, another one of the takeaways from today, you can pay me now or you can pay me later, right? So do the research up front.
Yes.
Speak to me ahead of time.
Exactly.
As opposed to when you're brought in to sort of clean up the mess.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, got it. Shannon Lee Simmons, Judith Hutter, good of both of you to join us on TVO tonight. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit TVO.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.